are if your Constitution does not state that. During the pandemic, protesters and dissidents who went out to protest, people who exercised their fundamental rights and opposed the tyrannical government mandates were met with extreme police violence in my country. And may I remind you of the Dutch farmers' protests? As you know, I was very much involved in that. And those brave farmers who objected to the state's plans to just rob them of their land, also they were met with extreme police violence. They even shot at a 16-year-old boy that was driving away from a completely peaceful protest. They missed his head by 1 inch. So please allow me, as a European woman who is not even legally allowed to carry pepper spray, to tell you, hang on to that Second Amendment of yours for dear life. And one other thing that I urge you to hang on to that is much more important and will offer you much more protection than your Second Amendment is your faith in God. Your faith in God is what will give you the strength and courage to counter every single lie that you are faced with. It is what will point you back in the direction of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And sure, sometimes things get tough. I know. But rejoice in the wins that we've already made. Because I don't know about you guys, but I can feel in my gut that something has shifted. Something is changing. The tide is turning, and the nationalist right wing is making win after win. Even in my homeland, one of the most liberal nations on earth, 1 in 4 people went out to vote for the so-called far right. The genie is out of the bottle, ladies and gentlemen, and the intimidation game has finally lost its power. Don't mistake my hopefulness for naiveness, though, because yes, a day may come when the courage of men fails. But those of you who love Lord of the Rings know what I'm about to say. Today is not that day. If you fear God, then you fear men. You will become unstoppable. So when you leave this wonderful conference, remember one thing. Always be a radical in the fight against evil. And let me end this speech with a few words, just one phrase from your great American poet, Walt Whitman. It is my personal motto in life, and I hope it will become yours. Ladies and gentlemen, resist much, obey little. Thank you very much.
Controversy brewing tonight over a trio of bills some parents say push a, quote, transgender agenda.
Parents told stories of lost custody, citing gender affirmations and identity as a cause, and expressed concern over the bill's supposed scope.
I think one of the turning points was when I received a text message when he was 2 years old of my son in a dress. That's all I want to do is hold my son.
When did this become an issue to get engaged about? Is when it stopped being a thing for adults to deal with, and it started to be a, let's tell kids that it may be that they can be the opposite sex.
You could say anything about your gender or sexuality, and the teachers would just nod along and be like, that's valid.
Teachers and counselors have zero background and training to deal with gender dysphoria. To me, it's criminal.
There's a war on children right now.
Why would you do that? It's not based on science. It is an ideology of harm. This is a weaponized use of apparent sympathy and caring and concern by the left to destroy your child.
Another chapter opened in this young girl's life.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, you got to give it up for the detransitioners. We got Identity Crisis, a big documentary coming out. This is a super important topic. I'm very honored to get to come out and moderate this panel. What we're facing really is an identity crisis that's being foisted on our culture, on our society, on our children in particular, and we're going to put a very personal touch on that. I want to open up just by talking a little bit about how serious this crisis is and kind of where it's coming from. I'll quote actually from, as I do, you guys saw me yesterday, I quote from the academic literature very frequently, and I want to tell you about a queer theorist in education. This is a guy that writes academic papers and books. His name is Kevin Kumashiro, and he has a paper that he wrote a number of years ago where he explains that the purpose of bringing queer theory into education, which they call queer education, queer pedagogy, the purpose is in fact to induce personal identity crises and make use of those to open up the possibilities for queer futures for the people that they do that with. But now we're talking about children in schools. So the goal that they have is to induce an identity crisis and make positive for them use of that crisis to drive their agenda to damage families, to damage faith, to damage our country, but more importantly, to damage individuals who become the agents of change for that agenda. And this has gripped at the highest levels of our institutions. This has taken over virtually everything, as you are probably well aware. This is in the schools, as you've heard, but it's not just in the schools. It's the guidance directly coming from the U.S. Department of Education and its Office of Civil Rights, which was long before the Bostock decision making advances into claiming that gender identity and sexual orientation actually should be treated under Title IX provisions. So it's very legal. The Office of Civil Rights has been pushing that, and now they have the Bostock decision backing them up. The good Justice Gorsuch, who is not exactly one of the liberal justices, actually wrote the decision for Bostock explaining on very flawed logic that, in fact, the prosecutor in the case pointed out, giving away the story themselves is flawed logic, that if you discriminate based on transgender status or gender identity status at all, then that means you must have discriminated based on knowing the sex of the person somehow. This is completely flawed logic, and this means it's deeply embedded in our jurisprudence at the Supreme Court. We have this problem in virtually every medical association has taken this up. We have it from the American Psychiatric Association, which is about to publish a horrifying guide that will be used to try to derail the lawsuits against this. The American Psychological Association has been pushing it for years. You may remember a few years ago they published a document actually articulating that traditional masculinity should be treated as a mental disorder. This is a rampant ideological takeover of the American Medical Association. So we have it deeply in everything. We have this program in our schools called Comprehensive Sexuality Education, which you may or may not have heard of, that has replaced what was already controversial, which was sex education. Comprehensive sexuality education takes everything that used to be in sex ed, anatomy, physiology, safety, you know, the basics, the nuts and bolts, how does it work, the birds and the bees, as it were, and it adds in other pillars like sexual citizenship and pleasure-based sex education, which is now a huge push. I'm not joking. And where does comprehensive sexuality education, which is already mandated in some states and is spreading, where does that come from? The United Nations. UNESCO created the program in 2003 and has pushed it so widely. I had the pleasure of being in London recently, and I spoke with a man from Kenya who told me that it's in Kenya's schools. Not just America, not just Canada, not just Britain. Kenya. Well, what in the world do they have? Well, they're a UNESCO member state just like we are. President Trump took us out, by the way. President Biden put us back. So this is deep. This is a deep crisis. Now, I don't want to go on and on and on about how big this problem is and how we need to be digging into this, how we need to be looking. We all saw Bud Light, right, with the Dylan Mulvaney beer can thing. Ugh. We all saw that. Well, we didn't parlay that. We think we won. We didn't win. We didn't parlay that to the next step. The next step would have been to have congressional hearings asking them, why in the world did you do this? What was the role of the nonprofit organization called the Human Rights Campaign in setting up a corporate equality index that all these entities have to play by, all these corporations have to play by? Why are all of our corporations doing this? Well, they're scored to do it. There are financial incentives and punishments if they don't do it. We need that exposed. But we also need to see the personal side of this. So I'm joined on the stage by many of the people in the documentary. We've got a couple of detransitioners here who are very brave young ladies, Laura Becker, Chloe Cole. This is the most important voice in America against this problem right now. Young women and some young men like these. Chloe, Laura, thank you. We've got a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, Joe Brugo, who works with these people in detransitioners and people going through gender confusion and other things in his practice. And we've got an everyday dad from California who's losing his son because this is also at the state of California level based off of all of that corruption that I opened up with for this crisis. And I want you to take home how personal all that administrative, bureaucratic, evil, academic nonsense. I want you to understand what the impact looks like in everyday lives. And so I think that queer theory represents the doctrine of a religious cult. I think it creates identity crises to move children into destruction. I think that because it's in their own words that I read and quote. And so I want to hear from you, Laura and Chloe, first about if that resonates with your experience. What has your experience been? Tell a little bit of your story. Since you're closer, Laura, you get to go first.
Everything that James just said is 100% true. I lived through the cult. I never thought that I would be indoctrinated. I never thought that I would be part of a fad. I was diagnosed in the autism spectrum when I was 11 years old. And I was also diagnosed with a hormonal disorder, polycystic ovary syndrome. I developed severe depression, anxiety, and I also had chronic abuse from a parent. I had undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was overall a very vulnerable and isolated child. And when I was in middle school, I found Tumblr. And on Tumblr, that's where all the misfits gathered. And Tumblr is also where the queer ideology spread. And by the time I was 15, I started identifying as genderqueer, as non-binary. And I started having symptoms of gender dysphoria, ruminating, obsessing about my female body and anatomy, and just overall feeling unlovable as a female. And eventually, when the suicide ideation became so pervasive that I felt hopeless, I turned to one of the only things that was presented as a solution to me, which was to medically and socially transition. And so at 18, I came out as a transgender male. 19, I was prescribed testosterone, which I injected weekly into my thigh. And at 20, I had a radical double mastectomy to remove my healthy breasts. And I was suicidal when I underwent those procedures. I had complex PTSD when I had those procedures, and I was brainwashed when I had those procedures. And so I absolutely agree that it is a cult. It is an existential, shallow solution to the spiritual void that we're all living through right now in this moment, but especially for young people. There was a spiritual void, there was an attachment void, a familial void, a sexual void. I was empty inside, and I was trying to fulfill myself by becoming a higher version of self that was actually a false version of self. And so absolutely, James, that I lived through the cult, and I'm very grateful to say that I've come out on the other side, and I'm so grateful to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Look at that. All right, Chloe. I see you nodding, Chloe. Tell us your story.
Yes. I really feel like I resonate with what you, James, and especially with what you, Laura, said. I definitely had a lot of the same issues growing up. I had autism, but it went undiagnosed for years until I was an adult. Very much a creative type, definitely thought outside of the box. And I had been sexually traumatized. And none of that was really ever addressed in therapy. It was all very much made about my gender, my sex, the way that I was born being the issue rather than these experiences that I'd had in my life. I feel like because we were born at different times, I just so happened to be growing up in the time when they started changing the standards of care and allowing children younger and younger to go through this. So I was a kid when I started transitioning, both socially and medically. I started to feel dysphoric at about 12 years old, after having an early puberty at 9 years old. That early development, it made me feel like I was being treated and seen as an adult while I still had the mind and body of a child. It was incredibly difficult to deal with. I was afraid of the responsibility of becoming a woman, of the possibility of becoming a mother, of how people might take advantage of me, my femininity. And there were times when I felt as though I would be happier. I would be a better person if I were born male, if I were a boy. And I started to actually believe that I was a boy once I was introduced to the transgender community online. And after I came out to my mom and dad, which I did through a letter, they wanted to be supportive of me, but they were also very cautious. And so they started sending me to therapy because they didn't feel like, because they didn't really understand the subject very much at the time, it was very novel to them that they would need further help in raising me through this. They didn't really expect that by seeing a psychologist, I would just be funneled further and further into this pipeline, rather than them going deeper into my issues, trying to figure out where these feelings were coming from. I was only really affirmed in the idea that I was made wrong, that I had to fix myself, that in order to self-actualize, I'd have to be reliant on medication for the rest of my life. And so at 13 years old, I was placed on Lupron as a puberty suppressant. I was put on testosterone to replace my natural female hormones. And at 15 years old, when I was just a sophomore in high school, that was when they removed my breasts surgically. And I stopped transitioning less than a year later, because I realized that I was, in fact, a very feminine woman, that I wanted to embrace my femininity, that I had a maternal instinct, that I wanted to become a mother, and that by transitioning, I was losing parts of my identity, not gaining. I was losing parts of my adulthood, of myself as a woman. And if I kept living in this fantasy of transition, I never would fully grow up. It was a tough journey back. I lost all my support from my doctors, from the transgender community. But I made it back. And I mean, I'm just so incredibly thankful for the support that I've had from my family during this time, from all of you. And since I was 17 years old, I've been speaking out about my experience, using the pain that my family and I went through to try and help the other children, the other men and women and families whose lives are being destroyed by this.
so proud and happy to be sitting up here seeing you all stand up and cheer for these detransitioners. It's such a big thing. It is so important, and I'm so glad to see the support. It makes me very proud to have come to Turning Point this year. Actually, this moment does. I want to turn to you, Joe. You're a clinical psychologist. You treat people in similar conditions to what the ladies have explained. Do you care to explain a little of what you're hearing from them, how common that is in your practice, and maybe some of the changes that your profession has undergone in the last few years?
Right. So the stories that I'm hearing today are very familiar to me. From the perspective of the detransitioners I work with in my practice, feeling of isolation, being a misfit, having undiagnosed medical problems, deep feelings of shame about themselves as if there's something wrong with them. And then they encounter this ideology that says, oh, that's because you're trans, and this will be the answer to all your difficulties. In my profession, it's called diagnostic overshadowing. It's because the minute gender enters into the picture, everything else goes by the wayside. It's understood that all of these other issues are a result of gender dysphoria and will be cured by transition. Of course, it's a complete fiction. And then when young people like Chloe and Laura figure it out, then they have to deal with all those mental health issues that weren't addressed before transition. Plus, they've got the incredible trauma and shame of having gone through transition, being attacked by the community that used to support them. It's a really horrible situation for these young people. The other part of my practice that I see is I see young people who are sent to me by their parents. They're trans-identified, and they're struggling with these issues. And the problem for me as a therapist in working with them is that I can't say exactly what I think is true because I've got a licensing board and a profession who is telling me that if I don't affirm these trans identities, then I'm committing malpractice, and they could come after my license. So it's like practicing with one arm tied behind your back. It's very frustrating work because you can't just come out and say, you know, it's impossible for you to change sexes and this is a cult that you've fallen into. You can never say that. And finally, the other part of my practice that I deal with is I consult with those parents. And this is the hardest part. I've been through it myself personally with my own daughter, but this feeling of
in that time, I was completely taken away from my son. The judge out of California gave me only 2 FaceTime conversations a week with my son. I've had to go through anger management. I've had to go through parenting classes. They weren't even called parenting classes. They were called child abuse classes. So I was sitting in a group full of parents that actually did abuse their child, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why am I here? I have done nothing to my son. And it has now spiraled completely out of control. They have removed me of all my father's rights, my parental rights. The judge ordered a gender assessment to be done on my son. I requested to sit in on this assessment. They denied me that. I had hired my own child therapist not to sway left or right, but to sit in on the assessment just to figure out how they're going to get to each step. And in my son's case, they didn't treat my son A, B, C, D, and all the way up. They went from A to Z with my son. I requested to have a phone conversation with the doctor, and I was denied that. The last 4 years has been one-sided. Not one time has opposing counsel, minors counsel, or the judges sat me down and asked me, the father, what I think is going on with my son. And now they refer to my son as my daughter in court. My son now has she, her pronouns, and my son now goes by a girl's name. His mother sent a letter to the school basically stating that at 4 years old at the time, that my son Aiden is now full transgender and that he is ready to come out, or she is ready, I hate to say that, sorry, but she is ready to come out and meet the world. And if you have any questions, I have books and information to share with you. And that was in the email that a parent had sent me. I would never have known about this email if it wasn't for the parent. And I'm going on 4 Christmases without my son. We are now in the middle of trying to file an appeal with the state of California to try to slow down this, in my situation, this child abuse. Anytime I bring up the child abuse, the doctors or the police department or anything like that, they tell me I'm crazy and that I need to go see a therapist for making these false accusations against the attorneys, the judge, and my mother, and my son's mother. So it's been a nightmare of 4 years, and it's still not over yet because now another judge in California has granted a 5-year restraining order against me. So that'll put me 8 years without my son, and at 10, that's when I'm understanding that they can start my son on the medications.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying. It's a horrifying story. Thank you, Adam, for your courage in telling it in a crowd like this.
Thank you.
So we've only got a few minutes left, but I want to kind of create an arc toward what people think what each of you think we might be able to do about some of this. But I just want to point out that what we see here is that we see young people who are struggling, who then go for help, and what they end up with is, was it therapeutic overshadowing? Is that what you call it? That turns into state overshadowing, which is also called tyranny. And this is the situation that this identity crisis faces here in America. And before I switch the solutions, we might go a little over. Sorry, guys. I want to ask one question of you, Laura, because last night we talked about this, and you said something that stuck out to me, and you got to be really brief, but that this experience you had turned into a channel to bring you into radical activism. And if you could just a few remarks on that, just so people can hear that why is this happening? Well, we create radical activists out of people if we do this.
Teenagers are always rebelling. That's their default and natural state. That's developmentally healthy. But what we're seeing today is an increase in academia, K-12 education, and media pushing young people to become radicalized so that they can become fighters for far leftist causes. Communism, and, authoritarian sorts of measures where there's censorship of speech and expression and thought. And that's what happened to me. I was on Tumblr. I was learning about feminism. I was learning about racism. I was very interested in understanding these abstract intellectual ideas. And I thought that I was, learning this, brand new, awakening, awareness, all of this. I thought I was becoming transcendent. In reality, I was actually reading postmodernist theory, as James has illustrated frequently. It's drivel, it's nonsense, it's grooming, and it's lies. More than anything, it's manipulation, it's lies. And young people like me and Chloe fall into this, thinking that we are becoming avant-garde or artistic or creative, when it's really suppressing truth. And if you're suppressing truth, you can never actually be authentic in reality.
All right, Adam. You're a dad.
Yes, sir.
What do we need to do? What do parents need to do?
Like I say in a lot of my videos, and I'm just speaking from the California side of all of this. I tell people you need to hold on to your kids extra tight. You really do, especially in the state of California. That's the biggest thing that I miss is holding my son. And I never heard "I love you" from my father until I was late in my age, but something told me deep down inside to make sure I told my son I loved him every single time I had him. And I think parents in California really need to stand up to what is going on in the state of California, because even though it happened from within the home, on my side, it's happening in the school districts, and I'm seeing it firsthand, just firsthand on what they're doing in California.
And stand up for this ballot initiative in California, right?
Yeah, we've got a ballot initiative from Aaron Friday. It's Protect Kids 2024.
Get involved in that.
So on that initiative, one of them is continuing the parental rights, keep the parental rights strong, to notify the parents in the schools. The second one is to keep boys out of girls' sports. And the second one is to stop the medications, the surgeries, or gender-affirming care on minors.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Joe, what do psychologists need to be doing? What do we need to do for our professionals?
Well, I naively thought when I moved into this space as a therapist that I could make a difference, and I do individually, especially for people who have detransitioned and moved out of the ideology. But I increasingly think that it's almost impossible for us to do our profession when the rest of the world is allied against us, when it's in the schools, when it's in the medical schools, medical profession, it's in the administration, it is everywhere. So to me, the answer is political.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Chloe, bring us home. You're the last word.
Fight like hell. Starting in our communities. Don't think for a second that this is just a California issue, because this is happening in every community, in every single city, in every single state in the U.S., everywhere in the West. It's infected our families. It's torn apart children from their mothers, their fathers, their caretakers, from the people who love them and know them best. It's infected our institutions, namely healthcare and education. You might feel afraid of the consequences of speaking out. The backlash can be brutal. But while you might lose your friends, you may lose your job, you can and you will gain so much more by living and speaking truthfully. We cannot ignore what is going on. These irresponsible, evil adults must be held accountable.
All right, everybody, thank you. You heard it from Chloe. Fight like hell. Thank you. Give it up for them. Thank you, Turning Point.
On Inauguration Day, the 4 years ahead
seems like an eternity.
It's not.
Because the left has engineered our government and institutions
To reject conservative ideology. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project
brings together over 60 conservative organizations
to ensure the policy and personnel are in place.
On January 20th, 2025.
Using 4 pillars,
We are laying the foundation
for the next president
to end Washington's bureaucracy and restore American prosperity.
How good do we have it here in America based on your experience all over the world?
I mean, this is a pure miracle. I was born in North Korea and I escaped when I was 13 years old. I would be homeless rather than being in North Korea. When I came to this country and I stepped on the land, I just felt the spirit of justice. This is the only country that I did not face racism. Even in America, the freedom is not guaranteed. And it's slipping away every single day. I genuinely believe that America is the last hope that humanity has.
Everyone, I am in the presence of Yeonmi Park. I'm Alex Clark. I host the Spillover podcast with Turning Point. And I was asked if I wouldn't mind joining Yeonmi today to get the juicy details of her story and change some hearts and minds, which of course I was very happy to do. Yeonmi Park, of course, if you're not familiar with her story, boy, are you in for a treat. You will be on the edge of your seat. She is an author, a best-selling author, a speaker, but also a survivor of North Korea. So Yeonmi, let's go ahead and just start. Walk us through the details of your childhood in North Korea.
Oh, thank you for the kind introduction. And I was just thinking to myself just right now, like, I cannot believe I had to call you a bastard all my life in North Korea. And you guys are the loveliest bastards in the whole world. I cannot believe. Literally all my life in North Korea, I had to hate you guys with all my passion. And here I am in this bright light. I was born in the darkest place in the world. In the 21st century, not to even mention what internet is, North Korea does not even have electricity. When I had a glimpse of, one light bulb of a pink line, that was a miracle. I would clap with my family, say, the light came. And here I am, surrounded by these amazing lights. How can you possibly not love capitalism? Thank you. This is a pure miracle. Growing up in North Korea as a child, I did not even play. I did not even know what that was. Now I'm a mother. I have a son. He literally, thank you. He is obsessed with the Star Wars minifigures. Yes. And I was thinking about my childhood. Literally the biggest thing I did with my friends was catching dragonflies and grabbing grasshoppers. And then one thing I still remember is my boyfriends, guy friends, they were a lot faster than me. They were catching cockroaches. And then when you catch a cockroach, they open the belly of the cockroach. Inside the belly, there is something looks like a brown rice. And then my friend would like pop it in their mouth. I would resent, like, why am I not fast enough to catch a cockroach? And that was my daily life in North Korea as a child.
What were holidays like in North Korea?
So this is the thing. There are no holidays for people. I could not believe there was a holiday called Valentine's Day or even Christmas. We are not allowed to celebrate anything other than dictators. So our holidays are like Kim Jong-il's birthday, Kim Il-sung's birthday, the mother of Kim Jong-il's birthday, the party's founding day. So all these holidays, so-called holidays, we had to be mobilized on the streets and the march and singing the worship songs for the dictators and saying how grateful we are to live in a socialist paradise. And there's not even one single day we're dedicated to celebrate North Korean people. And that's why a few years ago, Kim Jong-un banned Mother's Days. Because he thought if we love our mothers, we would not love him as much. So we are not allowed to love anything other than the fat Kim dictators.
Do you see similarities between that and how culture treats the family in America today, almost encouraging kids to separate from their parents, disobey your parents? If your parents don't affirm whatever your belief is, you should leave your family. Does that concern you?
It's interesting. So my teacher is in North Korea, every room that we have the portraits of Kim dictators. And the first thing that my teacher told me was, look at your dear leader. That's your real father, not your biological father. If he says something unloyal to the government, you need to come tell me. So governments would punish the parents. And now in America, I hear these things like teachers would literally teaching the kids saying, your parents are not safe if they don't validate your feelings. And trying to separate the children from the family. It is the same exact tactic that North Korea uses to separate people and isolate people from each other.
How old were you when you decided, I think I need to escape? And what did that thought process look like for you?
So I think this is where very hard for anybody to understand the situation in North Korea. Like growing up in North Korea, we don't even know the words of escape or freedom. The government don't give you that vocabulary to describe your situation. Literally, in North Korea, guys, we don't have word for stress. Why is that? Because how can you be stressed if you are living in a socialist paradise? You cannot be. So simply, government removes the concept like love or stress or depression from the people. So it wasn't a decision for me one day. I thought like, I'm gonna escape from this country. But by the time when I was 13 years old, I was starving. Like now I'm actually not even 80 pounds. At the time I was like half of my size and I would like literally fly away if the wind blows.
What kinds of things were you eating to survive?
I mean, the fanciest meal I had was grasshoppers. But daily life is a lot of plants, and if we are lucky, we get some grains. But literally in North Korea, you get executed if you eat cow. Because in North Korea, there's no private property. Nobody allowed to own anything, including cow. So most of food are not allowed for people to eat, other than most of plants and some grains.
So you decide to escape, and how long did the escape take?
It took literally crossing the Yalu River between China and North Korea. It took us one night.
Were there people set up to help you?
This is the thing. So right before my escape, my sister disappeared. And she disappeared because she escaped first before me. And then she left me a little note saying, go find this lady and this lady gonna help you to come to China and find me. I found the lady with my mother And then she helped us to go to China. They bribed the brokers on the border. It's not like crossing the southern border to America. Crossing North Korean border is every 10 meters, the guards with the machine guns standing there is a shoot to kill order. If anybody crosses the border, they have a right to shoot you. But this lady bribed the guards. And the reason why she was bribing this guard and sending us to China, it was because they were selling us as sex slaves. So that's how at the time I did not know why this lady was helping me, but that's why she helped us.
Do you remember, or were you even able to say goodbye to your family before leaving?
Sorry.
Were you able to say goodbye to your family before leaving?
Oh, I couldn't, because most of North Koreans cannot say the goodbye, because even we let them know, we trust them, they're not gonna report us to the authority, they are gonna get tortured if we disappear. And if they had a knowledge of us leaving, they're gonna get killed. So to protect your family members, you cannot tell them that you are leaving. Because the crime of knowing somebody is escaping and not reporting is a death. So we cannot let them know that we are disappearing.
So do your parents there know now if you're even dead or alive?
My father passed away, and then 3 generations of my family, from my mom, my dad's side, all got punished. And then my mother and myself made it to South Korea.
I think that's really hard for a lot of us to understand that mindset. It's your life. You have to decide if you're going to live or die, meaning you have to decide to escape or not, knowing that your family could be killed or tortured or imprisoned for your actions. How did you ultimately make the choice that you were going to escape anyway?
That is the thing. Like, even if we didn't escape, we would all die. Because that is the only fate that is waiting for us. So in the 90s, when I was a toddler, the biggest modern day malnutrition and famine happened in North Korea. And literally seeing dead bodies in North Korea is looking at a tree. That's how common it is, looking at people just dead on the streets. During this time, the cadres in the countryside went to Pyongyang and told Kim Jong-il, dear leader, there are millions of people dying right now from starvation. What shall we do? Do you know what Kim Jong-il said? He said to these cadres, saying, it's easy to do socialism when there are less of them. So let them die. And I do see that right now in America. How many people say the humans are diseased? That we are making Mother Earth sick? That how too many of us here? Because they fundamentally believe that. They think it's hard to control people when there are too many of them. And that's why that man-made famine killed more than 3 million of North Koreans in the 90s when I was a child.
What is the most difficult story to tell about your escape?
I think this is where the thing comes down to. I think I do have a shame or guilt of surviving it. And I know it so well, clearly. I didn't fought harder than anybody else, or I was smarter than anybody else. I got lucky. There are only 209 of us made it to America over the last 80 years. Thank you. And I'm one of them, so I always say the unicorns are rare, you know. But then, contrast to only 209 of us in America free, there are 300,000 North Korean women currently in China. Their organs are harvested out of them. they get raped and killed. When I was in China, they sold my mom for $65. And they sold me over $200 because I was child virgin. So I feel just guilty that I made it and not the people who fought harder than me didn't make it. So some days I get better, but I do think a lot of it is in there. Oh, thank you. No, no, you guys are too. Thank you so much. No, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Please, we have more time. Thank you so much.
When you first get to America, what is the first thing that you remember noticing that you were like, wow, this is different?
First place I came to in America was not New York City or LA or San Francisco. I went to Tyler, Texas.
Oh no. You were like, I don't know, maybe I should go back. No, I'm just kidding.
And then in Tyler, Texas, I was living in dormitory. My friends took me to Walmart. That is
the most American thing I've ever heard.
And then when I entered the Walmart, I couldn't believe it. Because the size of the chips were like a half of my body size. And I was picking up some apple. I did not, there were dozens different types of apple. And I went there to take like toothbrush and toothpaste. It's like the cavity care, whitening, whole care. Like there are dozen types of toothpaste there. And the fanciest thing I did in North Korea was using my sword with my fingers to brushing my teeth. And that's when I thought, capitalism is a simple miracle. I cannot believe. Thank you.
Is it even conceivable or possible that America, on the trajectory that we're on now, could end up anywhere close to the communism that you see in North Korea? Does that worry you?
Yes, I think a lot of you do have the same concern because in order revolution to happen, it doesn't require everybody to agree with the idea. Whenever we talk about revolution, they talk about the hot spots. Like in North Korea, the hot spot is Pyongyang. And they control the Pyongyang and they control the remaining whole country. In America, not all the people hating America, as we know, and look at you guys. But the problem of this country is there are hot spots, like in the coastal areas, like in New York City, Washington, D.C., in the West Coast, as we know. And I saw this in the first hand when I went to university in America to study. And literally, the professors were teaching the exact same things that my North Korean teacher taught us. To believe that all the problem that we have in the world is because of American bastards and because of white men. And my professors at Columbia University in New York City saying, the math is racist. It's made up by white men to control the minority. And I remember my very first lesson in North Korea where teacher asked me one day, Yumi, what is 1 + 1? What is 1 + 1? Yeah, you guys know the math. I said same thing. I said 2. And my teacher said, no, you're wrong. My dear leader Kim Jong-il at the time discovered that adding 1 drop of water to another drop of water, it doesn't become 2, it becomes bigger 1. That is how he proved math was made up by the Western white men to control the minority. And this idiocy was taught at Columbia University in the same exact way. And that's when I realized this is the end of civilization.
Do you think that there is any justifiable reason or excuse for a conservative parent to send their kids to public school?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Why?
Because it's not the government job to teach your child the values and life lessons. And it's not government's job to raise your children. It's your job. If you gave birth to this child, it's your responsibility. Thank you. Yeah.
Real quick, Yeonmi, and we'll wrap up here, but feel free to go absolutely scorched earth, okay? You have one thing to tell the commie leftists on our college campuses, something. They hate America. What is your message to them?
The border is open. Go to North Korea. It's a free country. Thank you so